preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I suppose I should even start this off after I just introduced myself. Rabbi David Woznica, director of the 92nd Street Y's Bronfman Center for Jewish Life, and before I even introduce our guest, to thank you. I know this is an evening where the weather isn't particularly cooperative, which just means that those who are here make it or have all the more of a greater interest, and just to say thank you in particular for being here. I want to tell you just about a couple of upcoming programs here at the Y, particularly of interest to those interested in Jewish studies. Next week, Rabbi Telushkin and I, and I'll mention in a moment why Rabbi Telushkin is not here, will be in dialogue with Marian Wright Edelman, who is the founder and the president of the Children's Defense Fund. Abi Yehoshua will be here at the end of April. His topic is Israel Identity in a Time of Peace. Essentially, what he's going to speak about is, and it's ironic, it says in a time of peace, and I suppose all of us in this room are hoping and praying that indeed it will be a time of peace. But the premise of his talk is that so much of Israeli identity has been founded, if you will, in dealing with concerns for war. And many Israelis, he is hypothesizing, are going to have to rethink their whole identity if, God willing, there will be peace. A good problem. Later in the spring, Jerusalem 3000 with ambassadors Abba Eban, Colette Avital, Martin Peretz, Stephen Bain, and Shlomo Avineri. A program Holocaust Aftershocks with one who worked for Raoul Wallenberg, one who worked with Foca Bernadette, and one who literally pulled off a train by Raoul Wallenberg. And finally, just to whet your appetite, coming up this spring is Rabbi David Saperstein, who will be speaking on Jewish perspectives on social justice. He is the director of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism in Washington. Much, much more of these and general programs, and I hope that you will have the opportunity to be with us. Very interesting. Sorry, I'm thumbing through my notes. Here we go. Rabbi Telushkin, who has joined me for these forums for the last 3.5 years, could not be here tonight because of what was an inadvertent mix-up when it came to scheduling after we knew that the catalog had gone to print. We were hoping even until last Friday that he could rearrange his schedule. He could not, but I wanted to let you know that obviously he's with us in spirit and in San Jose in presence. And he hopefully he will be with us next week. Now to my guests. Rabbi Alexander Schindler is president of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. Time magazine called him the most prominent spokesman for America's disparate Jewish groups. As UAHC president since 1973, Rabbi Schindler heads the synagogue movement of Reform Judaism here in the United States and Canada, composed of 1.3 million men and women and some 860 synagogues. He has led the Union of American Hebrew Congregations and its affiliates on a variety of issues. He first proposed the outreach program challenging Jews to become champions of Judaism, reversing the 500-year-old tradition that discouraged converts to Judaism, and welcoming non-Jewish spouses into the synagogue and the Jewish community. He first proposed designating as Jewish the children of Jewish fathers in interfaith marriages, making patrilineal descent equal to matrilineal provided that their children were reared as Jews. Rabbi Schindler has played a leading role in Reform Judaism's programs challenging Orthodoxy's monopoly on government support programs in Israel, publishing the first liberal commentary on the Torah, furthering the full participation and equality of women in Jewish religious lives, developing the most extensive and modern educational program of any branch of Judaism, and conducting a network of social action programs for world peace, economic and social justice, religious pluralism, civil rights, as well as civil liberties. From 1976 to 1978, he served as chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. He is a vice president of the World Jewish Congress, a member of the governing board of the Jewish Agency, secretary of the Joint Distribution Committee, and a vice president of the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture. He has received honorary doctorates from several American colleges and universities, and in Israel, 500,000 trees have been planted by the Jewish National Fund in the Schindler Forest.
Subsequently, they were uprooted when I took a critical position.
He was born in Germany in 1925. He and his family fled the Nazis, arriving in the United States when he was 12. He earned a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star for bravery and action as a ski trooper in World War II, and graduated from the City College of New York before studying for the rabbinate at Hebrew Union College, where he was ordained. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Alexander Schindler. To my left, pleased to welcome back Abraham Foxman, National Director of the Anti-Defamation League, who enjoys an international reputation as an articulate spokesperson for the safety and security of the Jewish people, of Israel, and of human rights around the globe. Trained as an attorney, Mr. Foxman was named to his present post in 1987 after serving as ADL's Associate National Director for nearly 10 years. He has been with the Anti-Defamation League since 1965. You don't look old enough to have been with anybody for 30 years.
It's inside.
As ADL's National Director, Mr. Foxman has met with elected officials and community leaders at home, as well as in Israel, the former Soviet Union, the Vatican, Poland, Romania, Ethiopia, Australia, Africa, Asia, Western Europe, and Latin America. He is an authority on the Holocaust and Jewish resistance to the Nazis, a member of the President's United States Holocaust Memorial Council, the Advisory Council to the New York City Holocaust Memorial Commission, and is a vice president of the American Gathering of Jewish Holocaust Survivors. He was born in 1940 and was saved from the Holocaust as an infant by his Polish Catholic nursemaid, who baptized him and raised him a Catholic. His parents survived, but he lost 14 members of his family, 8 on his mother's side and 6 on his father's. He arrived in the United States in 1950 with his parents after a lengthy custody battle with a former nursemaid who had come to love him as her own. He is a graduate of Yeshiva of Flatbush. He earned a BA degree in political science from the City College of City University of New York and a Juris Doctorate degree from NYU School of Law. In addition, he did graduate work in advanced Judaic studies at the Jewish Theological Seminary and in international economics at the New School for Social Research, and it's a pleasure to have you back.
I hope you realize, Abe, that introductions in their length are in inverse proportion to the importance of the speaker. The more important the speaker, the briefer the introduction. So they show, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Well, we obviously needed building up.
It occurred to me, we were speaking earlier, and it occurred to me once again as I was introducing you, that both of you witnessed anti-Semitism in your lives. Both of you were children in Europe during the Holocaust. I'm curious, what lasting impact and how has that affected you in your profession and in your personal lives? Rabbi Schindler?
Well, obviously, it affected my values and my ideas and my ideals. All ideas and ideals have their history, their biography, if you will. And obviously what happened to me as a child, what I experienced as a child, that left a lasting impact. Sometimes subconsciously so, but in effect, it did. If I had to point to the central value of my life, it is Ahavat Yisrael. This is the Madrega to which I aspire. I consider myself above all to be someone who loves the Jewish people with an abounding love. And this, of course, is the consequence of my life's experience, how I was raised. I'm an admixture of a great many things. You see, I love all kinds of Jews. Here I was born in Germany in a family that was German-speaking, yet my father was a Yiddish poet. My grandfather, Hashem Yikom Domo, he also was killed in a concentration camp, in an extermination camp, spoke Yiddish. He was a Polish Jew. When I was a little boy, I went to school in a Jewish day school, an Orthodox Jewish day school, yet at the same time, my father brought me to the great liberal synagogue of Munich, which was incidentally the first to be firebombed by the Nazis several months before Kristallnacht. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I'll get closer. Is this better? Yeah, and when I was a little boy, a youngster, my father took us to see Chaim Weizmann on a mountain walk of an Italian alpine resort, and with the same kind of zest, he brought me to an Eastern European spa where I saw the Belzer Rebbe, presiding over his table. And then when we came to the United States, he took me to hear the great Stephen Weiss preaching in Carnegie Hall, and then subsequently he dragged me down to the Lower East Side to meet Abe Kahan, the fiery anti-religious socialist editor of the Vorwärts. And he taught me a love for all Jews, and this is a value which persisted in my life. Actually, an experience which came later led me into the rabbinate. When I came here, I started out at City College. I was going to be an electrical engineer, but then I went into the army, and after the war was over, all of the American troops, all of the Allied troops were put against the Yugoslav border. At that time, they had problems between Tito and Mikhailovich, and I asked my captain for a jeep in order to go to Germany to see whether I could find any of our relatives. And of course, once I got to Munich, I saw what I saw. I saw them. I went up to Dachau. I saw the wretched refuse of those years, and subconsciously, this influenced me to change my career, as it were. When I came back, I registered in the Judaic Studies department at the CCNY, immediately left the engineering school, and went to virtually every school available to me in Jewish studies, the Jewish Theological Seminary, the Hebrew Union College, took courses at the New School, and then ultimately entered the rabbinate. So it was this latter experience of persecution which motivated me more to become a rabbi rather than that very early childhood experience.
It's interesting. Obviously, I want to ask you, Abe, this same question. One of the things I rarely mention in 6 years at the Y is that my father is a Holocaust survivor, and the reason I don't mention it frequently is I don't want people to think I love Judaism because of anti-Semites. I love Judaism because of what it stands for. And I'm very torn because, on the other hand, I know in my heart of hearts that I feel almost a sense of responsibility to those who went through something that, therefore, the grace of God, I might have gone through, and those from Rabbi Akiva to modern day martyrs die for being Jews, and here I have the opportunity to be a teacher, to simply be the carrier of the platter of this tradition. And I find your answer in some ways very settling, because the Holocaust obviously had an impact on you, but it came as a returning to, not as actually physically experiencing it. So.
Yeah. I mean, I did experience some anti-Semitism as a child, not anywhere near as dramatic as Abe. My father, Zichrono Livracha, had the foresight to leave Germany. He, as a matter of fact, left Germany the night Hitler was elected. To our good fortune, because they came to see him, he took Hitler by his word. Well,
yeah, Abe, you spent your life literally defending the Jewish people. How much of that would you attribute
Who knows? I guess it would be nice to say with a sense of certainty that my experiences in the formative years of my life shaped my adult life. I don't know. It is impossible for those of us who have survived at an early age, as I did, to be able to say with a sense of certainty that we remember this or that. It's very difficult for us to differentiate between that which we remember or that which we were told and we believe or think that we remember. And so, in a very lyrical sense, the events of the first 10 years of my life, I could say, shape what I've been doing in my adult life. Because I did experience anti-Semitism, but I really didn't understand what it is that I experienced till I was a teenager, until I had the opportunity to challenge my father, discuss with my father what it is that I lived through.
Can you hear well?
Okay.
Jimmy, can we thank you?
It wasn't till I was an adolescent that I began to understand and started struggling with what it was that I had experienced as a child. And at the same time, again in a very lyrical sense, I survived and I'm here because of the opposite of anti-Semitism, the opposite of hate, the opposite of bestiality.
Right.
And that's human courage, human decency, human kindness, human love, and that's the lady who risked her life to save me. And I've been privileged, very privileged, to spend my adult life dealing with both these forces. And that is adding a little bit that I can to fight the anti-Semitism, the ugliness, and at the same time to undertake an effort to bring a little bit understanding, tolerance, and even to embrace what we've been taught of L'Akira Tatov, to embrace the good. But I don't know whether or not my parents, whom I was fortunate to have survived, I don't know whether they weren't the formative force that set my value system. And I too was in City College and another failed engineer. I studied chemical engineering and switched out of that because that's not what I felt I wanted to do. But I would give more to the values that my parents instilled in me, the values that I learned in yeshiva and day school, rather than my experiences.
Were you aware of your Jewishness when you were with that nurse who rescued you, that non-Jewish woman?
No,
How old were you when you came under her care? And
I was born in 1940. My parents moved east. And so my parents, who lived in Warsaw, were married in Warsaw. When the war broke out in 1939, moved east to a place called Baranovich. That's where I was born in 1940. The war continued, and they moved further east. The Germans caught up with us and with them in Vilna, the capital city of Lithuania. My parents were comfortable and of means and traveled with my nanny. When the Germans occupied Vilna and the order went out for all Jews to report or be compressed into a ghetto, my nanny said, "I'll take care of him." They made a decision to leave me, something they could never really ever explain to me, what it was that led them to make that decision. It was the decision not only to save my life, but save their lives, because they were able to fend for themselves, knowing that they want to come back and survive for me. But so when they left me, I was 1 year and 3 months old. I didn't know who or what I was. When we were reunited, I was 5 and a half. I knew I was a Catholic. I was a good practicing Catholic. I went to church. I knew my catechism. And they were my aunt and uncle. And the first time I went to synagogue, my father took me to synagogue on Simchas Torah. I marvel at the amount of insight into psychology he had without any formal training. He took me at a time where Jews sang and danced. And I came home and I said to my mother, to my nyanya, and I said, Mamusha, I like the Jewish church because they sing and dance. Ochenvei, this was Simchas Torah, the first Simchas Torah after liberation, where 100,000 Jews perished in Vilna, and yet the Jews sang and danced with the Sefer Torah. On the way to the synagogue, I passed the church and I crossed myself. And on the way to synagogue with my father, I met a priest. I stopped, I kissed his hand, and I went on. So I really didn't know I was Jewish. In fact, again, I was told that when I was called a Žid, I came crying, saying they called me a dirty name and I'm not a Žid. Well, I'm proud to be a Žid.
I don't think anyone in this room expected that they would learn that you're a lapsed Catholic. I really don't want to spend the evening focusing on anti-Semitism, but I do want to follow a couple of other questions. And by the way, your experience, something that touched me. We have a program at the Y called Derech Torah, which is our introduction to Judaism, which is, we run about 12 classes a year, and they're full, far in advance. And many people use them as a basis for conversion to Judaism. And one of the things in my experience that I found is the way to touch someone's life Jewishly is not always intellectual. That's part of it. But the experiential of seeing something beautiful and seeing people dancing and the passion, and I mean, to my mind, that passion and that love, which can be palatable in all the different major movements in Judaism. What you just said is reflective of what it wasn't only. It's not just a 12-year-old child who can be touched that way, but an adult as well.
Well, this is why nowadays, in terms of Jewish education, I think the camp experiences are infinitely more effective in transmitting Judaism than is the exercise of formal religious training. Somehow, by living a Jewish life, by experiencing it, Judaism comes to life in the hearts of our young people. It becomes true for them. It's not just preachment, it's not just vague recollection. It's something which becomes their true and full possession. And I think one of the problems we encounter is to make the more didactic aspect of Jewish education, to interweave it with informal education, to bring that kind of experiential teaching into the classroom. If we could achieve that, I travel throughout the country, and I have yet to find a person who tells me, "Oh, I was inspired to become Jewish, become a leader of the congregation, or a cantor, or an educator, or a rabbi because I studied in Cheder." It's
Right.
9 times out of 10 somebody will say, I went to camp, I remember, I had this experience. And I think my own experience, I said I became a lover of the Jewish people because of what my father taught me, but that which instilled an appreciation of Judaism in me was when my grandfather took me to shul, and I prayed next to him, and he was a Baal Tefillah, and this made me appreciate the worth of Judaism as an essential element of the survival of the Jewish people.
Alex, if I can just add to what you call the camp experience, we need those experiences for adults too. You know, we think of camps as for children, but that's not a controversial point, but that experience for an adult can, and I think that's, by the way, one of the reasons that among some lines, the mystical, the Kabbalistic elements of Judaism are becoming particularly appealing to many Jews in their 20s and 30s and 40s who didn't get to taste and experience the Jewishness that we're articulating. And my passion in life, one of my passions, would be to see a camp-like experience, like at the Brandeis Bardeen Institute, and I only know it because I worked there for many years, for young adults and older adults and the like?
Well, we're beginning to do that within the Reform movement. We have 9 camps for living Judaism. Many of them are used for family retreats where the whole family comes together. And increasingly, we want to bring adults and have them have the same experience.
To some extent, the Israel experience replaced the camp experience. I've had the opportunity to grow up in a camping experience in various camps, from Camp Aguda to Labor Zionist camp to Herzl camp to Brit camps, that it really didn't matter. It was an experience which reinforced that which I learned in day school.
Right.
But once trips to Israel were cheaper than a summer camp experience, unfortunately, in a certain way, it almost destroyed Jewish camps.
Right.
And Israel became the substitute for kids of our camp experience. And while it did accomplish things the camp never did, at the same time, it failed to give that experience the joy of being Jewish in an environment with your peers, not your father or your grandfather, but with your own peers, that you don't have to be embarrassed. You can share it and enjoy, and that's missing.
Let me ask both of you. Abe, you are a product of yeshiva. Alex, you have been one of the. The concept of a Reformed Jewish day school. I don't know for sure, but is essentially your idea. The flourishing.
It wasn't my only idea, but I certainly pushed it from the very beginning.
Under your tutelage. Yeah. So you're both obviously advocates of private Jewish education.
Full-time Jewish education.
Full-time private, right. So am I. It is, for many Jews, prohibitively expensive. In New York City, anywhere from, can be $12,000 to $15,000 a year. There was in Los Angeles, about a year ago, a referendum for vouchers. Should everybody be given vouchers worth X amount of dollars? Some would have could use it for private schools, some could use it for public schools. It was defeated. In an interesting quirk, I read a bit about who supported the day, who were against rather the vouchers, and it was 2 groups, and very disparate groups. White liberals, who overwhelmingly send their kids to private schools, and inner city black kids, because their schools are so bad that they'll do anything to get out of them. This raises a whole slew of issues: church-state relations, supporting public school system. What do you think of a voucher system?
Well, I've consistently been opposed to having any kind of state support of religious institutions. Again, I'm not talking loud enough, is that it?
Talk as loud as you can, and I know the technicians will work.
When I preach, I usually yell. They once got the manuscript of a rabbi after he died, and in the marginal note it says, "Argument weak, yell like hell." So I hope I have something of substance to say that I don't have to yell. Now, where were we? Oh, state support. Well, my own experience, of course, taught me to appreciate the worth of this separation of church and state, the First Amendment of the Constitution. The separation clause has been, you see, wherever we went in our many wanderings, we were persecuted, we were hounded, and in virtually all of these places there was an official state religion. Here there was none.
Right.
So I certainly attribute those liberties which we have achieved, that status which we have attained in this blessed land, in no small measure to the separation of church and state. And I don't want that wall to crumble.
I can appreciate that, but why is it necessarily not a separation of church and state to give people the possibility of using some of their tax dollars for religious education?
Yeah. Let me first speak institutionally. The Anti-Defamation League, an organization that I've spent my adult life with, is opposed to vouchers to private parochial schools. We believe is in violation of the separation of state and church clause. And that's a position we've held. It's a position we revisit. We may revisit it again. I do, and again, I support the position of the agency. I believe in it. But I think it is one of those issues that is under serious review. It's not like prayers in the public schools. It takes on different configurations in terms of the value system of the community. And so it's, if you're looking at an area in organized Jewish life where there may be some new thinking, it's probably closer on the voucher issue. Mm-hmm. At the same time, anybody who believes that if tomorrow there are vouchers available, our problem of Jewish education will be resolved, that there will be a mass movement of Jewish students into Reform or Conservative or Orthodox day schools, that's poppycock. It won't happen. And if there will be $600 as a credit, what are we talking about? We're really talking about $600, $800, maybe $1,000 of credit per student. That will not resolve the cost, the problem, and the responsibility. It may, at a certain stage in time, be an added incentive, but certainly I think the challenge to our community in terms of what I think we all three value as day school education, that's not the answer. That's not the panacea. That's not what's going to resolve it. But again, you raise a question where I think there's more open debate and discussion in the community on issues relating to state church than on any other aspect.
You might ask David that question when he comes Saperstein. I think he's Al-Quran teaches constitutional law at Georgetown University, among other things. And I think his considered judgment on this issue would be very intriguing.
Let me ask you both, just to turn back to the topic that we started with. Alan Dershowitz, who was here last week, wrote in Chutzpah, when discussing the issue of Nazis wanting to speak in Skokie, that and I'm paraphrasing, but I think this is accurate, that it might have been tactically better had the Jews simply not made such a big deal about it because of all the publicity that was ultimately garnered. What should the response, is there a benchmark, Abe, for example, vis-a-vis how Jews should respond to events which are perceived as anti-Semitic? Can you give us some sort of generic value? I mean, are there times when the community should simply not respond in the hopes that the response will produce greater publicity than is necessary? Or are there times, or should we always respond vociferously? And similarly, just to tack on, when an anti-Semitic incident is reported to ADL, someone draws a swastika on somebody's house, what do you do? What does the ADL physically do? Do you go down to see what happened? Do you work with the police? So it's two questions, but they're related.
The answer is yes.
Okay. Rabbi Schindler, you agree with?
I certainly wouldn't disagree with the expert on the subject.
David, the answer is yes, and it depends.
To which question? I'm confused myself.
To all of them.
Okay, now I'm really confused.
I think there are standards and there are judgments. It is not an exact science. It depends in terms of the setting and the timing. I think a foremost consideration has to be the accuracy of the information, the credibility of the information that the community acts in response to. There needs to be a cool, wise assessment of what it is that we're dealing with, what the charge is, what the incident is, what its setting is. That's a prerequisite. That doesn't always happen.
In a word, then, do you think that Dershowitz would you agree with what Dershowitz said or disagree?
I would disagree more than I would agree. That means of course there are instances that one should not. Now, Skokie, again, a judgment that Dershowitz's issues almost presupposes that we have total control of all the incidents and all means. I will give you examples, at least one example. Recently, Ed Koch, dear Ed Koch, went all over me for criticizing Whoopi Goldberg. And he got on the radio and he said, what's Abe Foxman doing? He's got nothing else to do in his life than go after Whoopi Goldberg. Well, I went after Whoopi Goldberg, not because I have nothing else to do in life, but because the world is such that Whoopi Goldberg submitted a recipe to a cookbook, a fundraising cookbook. No, I don't read all cookbooks. We don't have people all over the place perusing to see who said what where. But the Daily News received that cookbook from somebody. Maybe one of the editors lived up in Connecticut. And as they went through that cookbook, they found that Whoopi Goldberg submitted a cookbook on Jewish American princess recipe. And I'm not going to characterize it beyond that. It was offensive. It was stereotypic. It was ugly. The Daily News calls me and said, Mr. Foxman, what's your view of Whoopi Goldberg? I said, I've never heard of it. What's your fax number? There was a time you could hide. Today, with a fax number, within 2 minutes, I had it on my desk, and in 5 minutes, the reporter called and said, what do you think? Well, I expressed myself. I said it was offensive, it was stereotypic, it borders on anti-Semitism, et cetera, et cetera. Whoopi yelled and screamed and called and yelled at me and hung up on me and called me back. All right, doesn't matter. But then I called Ed Koch, and I said, Ed, what'd you take off after me? He says, well, don't you have anything else to do? I said, let me ask you something, Ed. If the Daily News calls and says you're the Anti-Defamation League, and if I said I have no opinion, and you read in the newspaper on page 3 of the Daily News, you saw this excerpt from Whoopi Goldberg's recipe, and they said, and the director of the Anti-Defamation League has no opinion as to whether or not this is stereotypic and offensive. You'd go on the air and say, doesn't Abe Foxman have the guts to stand up to Whoopi Goldberg?
Let me ask you, Ed Koch said in the 80s, when Jesse Jackson was running for president, that a Jew would be crazy to vote for Jesse Jackson. I happen to agree with him, but I wish he hadn't said it, okay? One might make the same statement about Pat Buchanan today. I don't think Buchanan is good for the Jews, but I also don't think Buchanan is good for America. How much of an issue should Jews make of Pat Buchanan? In other words, should he become a Jewish issue or should he become an American issue? I mean, clearly both, but do you think, I actually want to ask you, Alex, do you think the Jews should take the lead on this?
They don't have to take the lead on it, but they certainly shouldn't be silent. He represents a danger to the safety of our community in the final analysis, and we ought to feel free to say so. That doesn't mean that we have to lead the pack, but we certainly should join in coalitions of decency with others who will be like-minded in viewing this as a danger, not just to the Jewish community, but to the very spirit of our nation.
You know,
I still want to go back to the other question to be a little bit more serious
Whoopi Goldberg.
about it. The Whoopi Goldberg. And again, maybe that's where I come from, but I think that's where the Jewish people come from today. I don't think we have a luxury anymore to err on the side of silence, hoping and believing that if we do, it will go away, we won't make it a Jewish issue, other people will act. We still have to do it within parameters of credibility, of decency, of good judgment. But we recently experienced a debate in the Jewish community on Minister Louis Farrakhan. Farrakhan's Million Man March. And we waited. We, the Jewish community, we, the ADL, waited. There was no question in our mind that the same Minister Farrakhan of a year before the march is the same hate, with the same bigotry, with the same racism. There were those in the community who counseled, don't don't make the Million Man March a Jewish issue. Don't talk about his anti-Semitism. And I would, not a secret, the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, and the ADL, we met and we counseled. And we knew that it would happen. We knew that it was a certainty, and we determined to wait and see what will be. And we waited. And we waited for the good people to say that which we believe needed to be said. And so as the march came closer, the Black Caucus met and decided to endorse the march. It's their prerogative, that's fine. And they endorsed the march with a caveat. And then we said, aha, here it is. And the caveat was, Black Caucus is endorsing the Million Man March because of A, B, C, and D, but it is troubled because Minister Farrakhan excludes women. And we kept our ears to the ground waiting, and it is troubled, and there was nothing.
Right.
2 weeks later, the Hartford school system endorsed the march. No comment, no voice. And when it became clear that nobody was raising the voice, we decided that we will speak out. And for all those who said that we made it a Jewish issue, that we diverted from the good that this could bring, our answer basically was the hate card was in the hand of Minister Farrakhan. At any moment before that march, he had the ability and the power to remove the anti-Semitism and the racism and the hate, and he didn't. And if he didn't, we didn't have the luxury to rationalize it, to explain it away, or to be silent.
You know, in a book that Joseph, Rabbi Telushkin, and Dennis Prager wrote, 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism, or it may have been Why the Jews, I'm not sure which one, they make the analogy of the miner's canary to Jews as a moral miner's canary. You know, the miner's canary, when miners can't always tell when there are noxious fumes in the mine, so they take a canary, which is very susceptible, and when they see that the canary dies, it's a statement to them to get out of the mine, there are noxious fumes here. And they make the point in their book that the Jews are, in a sense, a moral litmus test. They are the first to go, but never the last to go. And what the rest of the world can learn is those who hate the Jews, it's a statement of their the lack of morality. And 2 examples which come to mind very quickly. Khomeini's, I think, first official act in '79 was to close the Israeli embassy. We know what happened has happened in Iran since, and I believe Idi Amin in Uganda, very, very similarly. And later, 300,000 or 600,000 Ugandans are slaughtered. When the world learns that the Jews become that litmus test, then when what becomes a Jewish issue become a world issue. Let me just shift, if I can, gears.
Well, I
please.
just want to make one point, I think, which is important here.
Please.
And that is that despite the fact that in this particular instance there was silence, we have many, many more allies than we had in the past. I happened to be here in the 30s. And in the 30s, it was, we stood alone. You could get no one to speak up. Thanks to those coalitions of decency which we have formed, the community as a whole does respond very, very frequently. I'll give you only one example, and it isn't that widely known, to my surprise. But a couple of years ago in Billings, Montana, the small congregation, the Reform congregation, was defaced by anti-Semites. There were swastikas smeared and anti-Semitic slogans on the walls, both inside and outside the synagogue. And the community of Billings responded in a very intriguing way. It happened to be around Hanukkah, Christmas time. And not only did the forces of decency in the community, that means the civic associations and the church groups, as well as the newspapers and the editorials, denounce and help the Jewish community to rededicate its house of worship. During that Hanukkah season, thousands of non-Jewish citizens of Billings bought Hanukkah menorahs, kindled them, and put them in their windows to tell these skinheads of the Northwest, we don't want any of you. We are against you. You are outsiders. So compared to what was in the 30s, we have many more allies. And while we have to speak up, I am unalterably opposed to the conclusion which is often drawn, namely that we have to be separatists. We cannot do it alone. We will not do it alone. We need allies. And our safety is in these, what I call coalitions of decency, in the final analysis.
Please. I think that's an exceptionally, I not only do I clearly agree with you, I think it's a very important point, because I think the mentality, I think that's a generational change, if I can say that. I think by and large, and it's one of the dangers of yelling anti-Semitism too often in America, because I think overwhelmingly Jews are respected and liked by America at large. I think that there is a general hatred of evil, and that we don't stand alone. I think that those coalitions are so genuine. By the way, it's one of the reasons I guess I'm a little fearful of those who want to tear down America. It's not to say there's not time to question, but I think that we are being given an incredible opportunity in America.
Yeah. But this doesn't mean that I disagree with Abraham
No, I understand.
and all the others. Quite the contrary. I mean, never more let it be said of us that we had eyes and didn't see, and we have ears and didn't hear, and above all, that we had mouths and that we failed to speak. We have to speak up. You can overdo it. Judgment is important. It occurred to me while you were talking that there's a historic example. There was an anti-Semite 2 millennia ago by the name of Appian. And a great Jewish leader, Philo, I believe it was, wrote a book, Contra Appionem, against Appian, in which he took this anti-Semite to task. And the oddity is that nobody would remember Appian had it not been for this classic book attacking Appian. So this is a fallacy which can often be committed, but Abe was absolutely right. It's a question of what the situation is. And yes, if you can make a friend of an enemy, Lincoln, I think, once said the best way to defeat an enemy is to make a friend. So if you can bring someone closer, fine. And Abe and the ADL have done that over and over again.
Let me change to specifically Jewish issues on a little more personal level. Do you believe in an afterlife?
Do I believe in an afterlife? Well, I don't know. Nobody has disproved it to me. Proved it or disproved it. Somehow, I would hate to think that all of those worths which our life enshrine, our ability to think and to dream and to hope, and that all of these will vanish into a nothingness. I had a rather interesting experience with a famous Reform rabbi, Jimmy Heller. I don't know whether the name is familiar to you. He was a rather modern person. He was a rabbi of a leading congregation in Cincinnati, Ohio. He also wrote, he was a composer. He wrote the program notes for the Cincinnati Symphony. He was a labor Zionist all his life. And he also was a world-class bridge player. When he came to New York, he played in the Cavendish Club. And when he became very sick, I visited him on his deathbed. And I want you to know that that man was radiant with hope. He said, I'm looking forward to meeting my father. I'm going to re-embrace him. And I'm going to engage Mendelssohn in an argument because Mendelssohn said that while the souls will survive en masse, there will be no individual consciousness, and I'm going to disprove him. And I thought, well, maybe these are the consolations of a person who's lying on his deathbed, only to learn subsequently from Maurice Samuel, who was a great lecturer, that he debated with Jimmy Heller when they were both young men on that issue, and Jimmy Heller said, yes, there is an individual afterlife. Obviously, there are two elements which do live on. Number one, there is memory. Memory somehow has a way of bridging that terrible chasm which separates the living from the dead. I spoke about my father. My father's been dead for 20, 30 years now, 56. So it's almost 40 years, 50, 60, 40 years. And there isn't a day that goes by. Well, that's an exaggeration. Rabbinic hyperbole. We rabbis are prone to hyperbole. But very, very often, I make judgments in relation to what my father would have wanted. And then his image is before me. And I can tell you, so long as I live, he too will live, because I remember him. So memory certainly provides us with some immortality. And the second thing is the human deed. You know, Shakespeare was wrong. The good is not interred with our bones. The beauty that we fashion cannot be dimmed by death. The love we give in life lives on long after we are gone to bless the lives of others. There's a very beautiful midrash about Hananiah ben Teradion, who was burnt at the stake, wrapped in a scroll of the law for teaching Judaism. And his pupils who witnessed his pain and his torture cried out to him, "Our master, our teacher, what seest thou?" And he replied, "I see the parchment burning, but the letters of the law, they soar on high." And this assuredly is true for us. You know, our flesh may perish, our hands will wither, but that which they create in beauty and in goodness and in truth, that lives on for all time to come. So that I can speak of with assurance. And we live on in the institutions we create. Through our children, of course, too.
Have your views on the afterlife changed as you've aged?
Well, when I was young, I didn't give the matter any thought, obviously. You know, I was sure that I was immortal.
But when your father died 40 years ago, you were young.
No, yes, we are still.
Have they changed over the last 40 years, for example?
Well, they've. I've become less certain. You know, I remember I used to have a teacher at City College. He was sort of a Germanic instructor. He says, "Schindler, don't be cock so sure of yourself." So I've learned to be less sure of myself as I grow older.
David? Yes, I believe in an afterlife. It's comfortable to believe in it. Two, it's traditional to believe in it. It's traditional to believe in it, but it is very comforting. It hasn't changed very much. Again, without a theological explanation or a sense, it's. I've always felt, as Alex puts it, as memory. I've always felt that what I do in this world is at least not for rewards for an afterlife. It's never that what I do is very important. This life is important for itself, not because there is or there isn't. But at the same time, I've always felt that if I do something right, that my family here hopefully appreciates it. But I believe that my parents see and witness and shepnachas in whatever sense that means. And that's a comforting thought. And again, without deep theological meaning, I want to believe in it. Since we can't prove it either way, why not believe in that which gives comfort and which links us in a tradition which does believe in or teach or speak in terms of Elam Haza and Elam Haba, in whatever sense it is. And if I believe in it now, then probably 20 years later, believe in it even more.
Certainly we should conduct ourselves in such a way that if there is an afterlife with the Holy One, blessed be He, we will be worthy of it.
Do you feel a sense of God in your personal life? A sense of God? you feel that somehow God is involved in you in a very personal way?
Well, I would scarcely be a rabbi if I were not to, affirm that. I believe it very much. There are many difficulties I have. There are times when I doubt. There are times when I struggle. This too is part of the Jewish tradition, is it not? We were given the name Israel as a result of that wrestling with the idea of God, but I certainly do believe in it with all my being. People have problems with the God belief because, the temper of our age doesn't allow us to affirm. There's this logical positivism which says that the only thing that's real is that which can be perceived by the physical senses, and above all there's that pragmatism which says that the only thing that we should ascribe value to is that which is of use, which is of practical worth. But there is an invisible world which has a reality all its own, and its force often is more intense than is the force of the world that is seen.
Let me ask you that. Actually, I think if you turn your microphone, turn it this way. You can actually, that's it.
Okay.
Maybe that'll better. I'm a graduate of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religions, and I had discussions as a student in seminary with, frankly, other rabbinical students who didn't much believe in God. And your first statement was something like, I wouldn't have become a rabbi. Now, you are the spokesperson for the Reform movement, and I'm a very proud graduate of HUC, so everything I say to you is a gentle prodding, but there's several issues I want to raise with you. Should someone be allowed to attend rabbinical school, or should someone be able to be ordained a rabbi if they not question God's existence, but don't believe in God, or deny God's existence?
Then I think they have no place in a seminary. Now I certainly, would not want to erect a wall which would preclude the possibility of the spiritual development of an individual. But I don't understand why a person would enter a rabbinic seminary when he is an atheist.
Let me then take it just a little further. Rabbi Shelley Zimmerman, who is the incoming
president of the Hebrew Union College.
Right, and at the time, 2 years ago, was the president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is the representative body of the congregation of Reform rabbis in America, said the following, and I wrote the quote down because I wanted to hear your response to it. He said, "When some of us co-officiate with priests or ministers at weddings in churches, we step over boundaries. When we pursue minimal Shabbat observance in our lives, and are there in supermarkets and malls on Shabbat, we desecrate our rabbinate." A Reform rabbi has the option of performing an interfaith ceremony, although the movement has taken the discouraging stance. And there are some Reform rabbis who eat pork or shellfish by choice. What are the standards to which the Reform rabbinate should adhere to? In other words, is there something that a Reform rabbi can do that would render them, in your eyes, outside the bounds and should either receive a censure or be asked, frankly, not to hold the position anymore?
Well, I'm not in the excommunicating mode at any time, and I don't want to render judgments on other people's feelings. I have to make decisions for myself, and I draw boundaries. And I agree with every word that Shelley Zimmerman wrote in that speech. As a matter of fact, I think I heard him deliver it in Chicago at a meeting of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. I can see where someone officiates at an intermarriage because he doesn't want to reject a couple, especially when promises are given. But on the other hand, there are charlatans in the movement who do it for a buck.
Would you?
And
I mean, not for the buck, but I mean, would you officiate that?
I don't. I have not. This doesn't mean that I reject the intermarried. I can be against intermarriage and still,
Embrace the couple.
those who are intermarried, and this has been my position. One of the things that I would like to be remembered for is the whole outreach program and our determination to embrace the intermarried, to oppose it until it happens. But once it happens, it seemed to me that we have only one of two choices. Either we do what our forebears did and set Shiva over them, or we try to embrace them, bring them back into Jewish life, draw them into the synagogue in the hope that the non-Jewish partner will opt for Judaism, or at least to make certain that the children issuing from these marriages will in fact be reared as Jews and share the destiny of the Jewish people.
You have been the champion of the patrilineality position, which essentially said that the father or mother, as long as the child was raised as a Jew, would be considered a Jew. It is clear in my experience, by the way, everything you said I happen to share your perspective on, so here maybe a questioning. It is clear in my experience that many people converted to Judaism because their spouse was Jewish, and it was either a spoken or an unspoken, well, usually a spoken discussion of how important this was to the spouse. Now, and also obviously the issue of children, the question of whether they would be Jewish or not, was also an impetus for people converting to Judaism. I have two questions, one to you regarding this and actually one to Abe. Does the patrilineal decision discourage people from converting to Judaism if you believe at the outset that one of the reasons that people converted was as a result of a desire to create a cohesive Jewish home?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, the fear was expressed. I really don't believe so. It certainly eliminates certain anomalies in Jewish life. When I first proposed this idea, the grandson of Ben Gurion came to see me. This was in the early 80s, 1983, 84. And he said to me, I want to thank you. I said, why are you thanking me? He said, I want to thank you for the patrilineal decision. Of course, I knew that Ben Gurion's son married a non-Jewish woman who was converted to Judaism by a Reform liberal, Rabbi Joachim Prinz. And he said to me, the reason I'm thanking you is I just returned from the war in Lebanon, and if I had been killed, the rabbinate would not have allowed me to be buried in a military cemetery. So I said, well, I have a suspicion that the rabbinate would have found some way of taking Ben Gurion's grandson if, God forbid, you had been killed. Now, that's one pole of that anomaly of which I speak. The second pole is Khrushchev. His son married a non-Jewish woman. And I don't know anything about the children, but I suspect strongly that since they were reared in that Kremlin communist environment, A, they didn't know that they were Jewish, B, they were anti-Zionist, C, they were anti-religious, yet halachically they're considered Jewish.
Right.
So I felt that was absurd. In some ways, the Reform decision is more stringent than is orthodoxy.
Yes.
We are machmirim in the sense that insofar as genealogy is concerned, both the father and the mother are treated equally. But we say that genealogy alone is not enough. There has to be a positive manifestation of a Jewish commitment, whether the father is Jewish or whether the mother is Jewish. There is no automatic Jewishness which devolves merely through the genes.
Even if the mother is Jewish?
Even if the mother is Jewish. That's why I say we are machmirim.
It's very. I don't think most people know that. In other words, let me just see.
In other words, if the mother is Jewish and the child is raised, let's take Khrushchev's grandchildren.
What if the child is raised with nothing?
With nothing, I would still say the same thing. Then you're not a Jew.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's the patrilineal position is a rejection of the matrilineal.
No, it's not a rejection of the matrilineal. It is also, it's not a rejection, but it sets standards in addition to genealogy
Educational.
on both. Education,
Very interesting.
a willingness to share the destiny of the Jewish people, a love for Israel. However this is defined, there has to be an overt expression of Jewishness before a child.
So this is very interesting. So it's actually, tell me if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, it's actually not blood, it's values.
It is genes plus. And the plus is as important as are the genes. It's not just the racial definition.
Right.
The truth of the matter is, of course, that while this reverses a 2,000-year-old tradition, as you know, in biblical times, this was the norm. The genealogical tables of the Bible are all paternal, barely a woman. Yeah, I'm talking about all of the begats. The laws of inheritance go from father to son, with only one exception in the Chumash, which is singled out. The children of Jewish fathers and non-Jewish mothers are all of them regarded as Jews.
Right.
To this day, Orthodox Jews and many Reformed Jews bless their children on Friday night, and they say, may you grow up to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. But who were Ephraim and Manasseh? Ephraim and Manasseh, they were Jewish because their father Joseph was a Jew, but their mother Asenath was the daughter of a priest of On who worshipped the sun at a heathen shrine someplace in Heliopolis or wherever it was. Solomon had many wives, foreign-born wives, and the son of one of them, Rehoboam, became king of the Jewish people. And that tradition continued throughout Jewish history, even in rabbinic times. How is an Orthodox Jew called, except in the more modern Orthodox synagogue, how is he called to the Torah? Called to the Torah by his father's name.
Sure.
And we are told in our tradition that we live by sechut avot, by the merit of our fathers. And when a non-Jew is converted to Judaism, that child is called the son of Abraham Avinu, the descendant of our father. And above all, how does one become a Levite or a priest? Only through the father. Well, my feeling was, if it's good enough to pass on the priesthood, it sure is good enough to pass on Jewishness. But there has to be something more than that.
Interesting. Abe, do you agree with that decision?
No, I personally I don't. Traditionally, I don't. At the same time, I applaud and I appreciate Alex's struggling creatively with the problem, because there are a lot of people who bemoan what's going out there and don't take the next step. Alex makes some interesting arguments. Had I been trained in halacha, or if it was fresher in my mind, there are answers to some of the things that Alex says. But what's more important is that we have to engage the community, the rabbinate, the leadership, as to how we save Jews. How do we bring them into the community rather than chase them away or keep them out?
So then why not agree with his
He doesn't have to agree. He
No,
doesn't-
but
he doesn't.
I don't officiate.
No. Wait.
You know, there's a difference between personal sentiment and communal policy, and he's obviously drawing that distinction.
No, and I appreciate that, but is it not then better, let's go back to the communal policy.
Right.
Because is it not better then to be as inclusive for the sake of the Jewish people as possible?
Well, inclusive for the sake of inclusive can also so dissipate us that what are we? Now, Alex raised, I've heard for the first time some of the things that you've heard. Now, I don't know who sets those values.
Right.
Mr. Khrushchev's whatever granddaughter, et cetera. Who will determine at what point it shifted? That's very, very difficult. I think the concept or the attempt or the effort to find ways lekarev rather than to la'afrid.
To bring in rather than push away.
To bring in rather than to keep out, I think is what's important. And those of us who know and watch what's going on in Israel know that this country that we love out there, that has all those rules based on halacha, that this country, in absorbing immigrants from Russia, from Ethiopia, and from other places, is acting in a way to bring them closer and not to keep them away from Judaism. And so we know that with halacha they will find ways so that a couple coming from Russia who don't fit all those halachic interpretations that we simply apply are part of the community because there are ways of...
I hope that they will find the ways to do so. I've often maintained that if the Poskei Hador, the decisors of a generation, had a little bit more guts, there would be no need for reform. There would have been no development of reform. So my policy is very simple. I want to bring the outsider to the inside and those who stand at the periphery to the center. This has been the goal of my striving. I once had an argument with Shapiro of the Aguda, you know, the carpet merchant now has got surahs of his own. And he argued with me about patrilineality and outreach, and I said to him, listen, you come over to the United States and I promise to bring together tens, hundreds of intermarried couples. And if you can convince them to be Gerech Hasidim, I will bless you. But don't you tell me to turn my back on them and to ignore them and to read them out of the Jewish fold. You see, you asked me a question about the impact of patrilineality. Everything has its price. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And it is true that when you reach out and accept the intermarried, to some extent you legitimize intermarriage. But the contrary course of action, namely that of conscious exclusion, would be infinitely more costly to the Jewish community. You would be reading out talk of day schools. The intermarriage rate, according to Egon Mayer, of day school alumni has gone from 5 to 25% in 20 years because we live in an open society. What are we supposed to turn our back on these children? I say bring them in, bring them closer. Now, does it dilute Judaism? You refer to the dilution. That's up to us. If our standards are high, then there will be no dilution. And we know that very often the person who chooses Judaism is better Jew than the born Jew, because a choice has been made.
And by the way, in that regard, there is a misconception among many Jews vis-a-vis making distinctions between the person born a Jew and the person who becomes a Jew. And that's something I think that we who are in Jewish education have to make very, very clear. I mean, my respect for someone who becomes a Jew, I mean, they did it as a conscious decision. They took on something, I have a theory about this. They took on something seriously that most Jews may not take so seriously. And overwhelmingly, the more religious the born Jew, the more accepting of a convert to Judaism. And my theory is because to a secular Jew, someone who converts to Judaism is a challenge to them. You're taking something seriously that doesn't mean that much to me? What are you talking about?
Listen, the most frequent complaint that rabbis receive from Jews by choice is the fact that the Jewish partner is not interested enough, doesn't want to go to shul, doesn't want to have the kids, take the kids to religious school and so on and so forth.
What a tragedy, no? It's or maybe a good thing. I don't know.
Well, one of my favorite sayings in this realm is something which Navon once told me. He's the only Israeli who had some kind of sympathy for this outreach problem. Most of them, don't understand this issue. Right. It's assimilation or aliyah, one of the two. Anti-Semitism, assimilation, or aliyah. Right. These are the three A's of the Israeli view of the diaspora. But he had some understanding of what I was trying to do, and he told me that Albert Einstein once said to him the following. He said, I am sorry that I was born a Jew because it kept me from choosing to be a Jew. And there's one other thing I want to throw in the hopper here, that the truth of the matter is that we live in an age of choice, and that born Jews have to make choices too.
Which is why I think that Judaism has to compete in the world of ideas on the most sophisticated level, which is why I've said it here so many times. I work one of the great Jewish cultural institutions in America, but if it is simply cultural, Judaism will die. There is more, and I love Jewish culture, but it has to be education, it has to be depth. They have to not only feel the beauty of beautiful Jewish music, which we spoke about earlier, but understand that Judaism speaks to the Jew vis-a-vis his parent-child relationships, his business work. So many of the moral and ethical problems that we deal with today, our tradition speaks to, and I think many Jews are thrilled to learn about it, but may not have.
Part of the irony and part of the tragedy is that when we talk about choice, unfortunately, unless the young person was exposed somewhere, day school, at home, there is really no choice, because very few people will ever choose something that they've never experienced, except in a marriage situation or epiphany or some trauma. Mm-hmm. But when my generation said in discussions with me, when I say you have to give them a Jewish education in order to enable them to decide whether or not they want to choose.
No, you're right. You know something. Not only that, I would say that in many ways we have stolen, and I use the word advisedly, stolen the tradition from the next generation. Having said that, there is such a thirst among young adult Jews for it that the minute we jump in, I think they'll come. Let me ask you to look into your crystal balls and give me a thought of what you think the Jewish community will look like in the next 20 or 30 years.
The Chinese had a saying, to prophesy is exceedingly difficult, especially with respect to the future. I have no idea what it will look like. I hope that it will be totally changed.
Really?
I have, because I think that the genius of our survival is our capacity to change. Uh-huh. The change within Orthodoxy may be less noticeable because it is much slower, but it is a change nonetheless. I can tell you that my grandfather would not recognize some of the Orthodox synagogues that I go to today.
Right.
The mechitza is no mechitza, and the women are virtually at the Eastern Wall, which is wonderful as far as I'm concerned. So I hope that
the mechitza is a mechitza. It just looks different.
Yeah, it just looks different. So you can look over it, which is precisely.
There are more single Orthodox Jews, and that's.
Yeah. So, but look, even there's that famous midrash when Moses, was allowed by the Hakodesh Baruch Hu to come to earth and to visit the school of Rabbi Akiva, and he was listening to the debates which were going on, and he didn't recognize what he saw. He didn't understand the word, and he felt reassured only when Akiva concluded the discussion by saying, we have this as under the authority of Moses, who received the revelation on Sinai. But what were the rabbis telling us? That Judaism is never in the process of being. It is always in the process of becoming, of a relentless flowing on. And that's why I hope that it will be different, and that in that capacity to change is the magic ingredient of our people's wondrous endurance, so that I'm suffused with hope about our future. I don't believe in the vanishing American Jew, either numerically or substantively.
Our prophets were not as polite as the Chinese about those who prophesied after the destruction of the Second Temple. So we're not going to engage. But David, I am an optimistic pessimist by nature, which means I don't think it happens. Well, I'll apply it to the question that David asked us. And I believe that there will be a creative Judaism and creative Jewish life in America 20 years, 30, 40 years from now. I agree with Alex, it will be different. I remember when I first started in organized public Jewish life, I did a great deal of reading. I came out of law school. I wanted to better understand the community that I'm about to try to serve, and so I did a great deal of reading. And had I truly believed that those in the 60s who prophesied the fate of the Jewish community, I would have gone back to City College and restudied chemical engineering. In the 60s, the sociologists, the analysts prophesied that there would be no Jewish, vibrant, active Jewish community by the end of this century. We are on the threshold of the year 2000. Yes, we have problems. Yes, we have difficulties. But we're alive and well and vibrant and changing and challenging with all kinds of institutions. Because what isn't ever factored in, and these are Malthusian approaches to life, which doesn't always apply, is who 30 years ago was willing to prophesy. I know we talked about the hope of the finding millions of Jews. But 30 years ago, the Iron Curtain was that Iron Curtain, and the Soviet Union were the Jews that we have lost. There are 1 million new Jews in the United States and Israel in the last 10 years who have been reborn. In terms of the United States, regardless of the value judgment you want to put on it, there are Israelis in the tens and hundreds of thousands. They may not be, they may not be going to synagogue, etc. But there's again a vibrant new element in our life and our society. So yes, I am confident that my children will have an environment where they will be able to raise, hopefully willingly, their children in a positive, warm, exciting, passionate Jewish surrounding.
Just to share with you, we were commenting over dinner together. I think I don't remember if it was Look or Life magazine predicted in the 60s, I think, on the front cover,
It was Look, yeah. The
Vanishing American Jew. And
I saved it.
And the comment there was, we're still around, but you can't buy Look magazine anymore.
Well,
and
you can take that further back, because in the Maccabean period there were coins that were created by the Romans, which have the following legend: Judea est perdita, Judea is destroyed, the Jews are no more. Well, Rome has fallen and remained fallen, Assyria has fallen and remained fallen, Babylonia has fallen and remained fallen, but the Jewish people lives, and we will continue to live.
And Arnold Toynbee, who wrote a book about the fossil, the Jewish people. He's a fossil, 6 feet under, and we're here discussing the future of the Jewish people.
The older I get, the more I begin to appreciate that the great leaders are always those who are willing to be self-critical. It's very easy to be critical of other movements, other people's, but the real leaders are those who are willing to not only be critical of our own, but those who take risks. And I'm very grateful to both of you, Rabbi Schindler, as a leader of Reform Judaism, but not only that, a leader of the Jewish people who has genuinely made this tremendous impact on not only current generations of Jews, but clearly future generations of Jews who will debate and argue the changes in that you have spearheaded. But having said all of that, no matter what they conclude, they'll conclude there are thousands of more Jews as a result of your work. And Abe, as a result of your work, that so many of us can do what we do, protecting the Jewish people, not only our physical safety, but our emotional well-being, I think, and in many ways as an exemplar of a deeply committed Jew on every level. It was genuinely a pleasure to have you with us, and I look forward to having you back once again.
David, may I? I was raised in a tradition, European tradition, as was Alex, and I grew up in languages which differentiated between the familiar and the non-familiar. And to the last moment of their lives, I referred to my parents in third person. David, when we got together to just to shmuyas and to chat and set some ground rules, said, well, how are you going to refer to each other? And Rabbi Schindler said, Alex, Abe. I want to tell you, it's not easy to refer to you as Alex, Rabbi Schindler, because I remember the first time we met, having shawarma at 2 o'clock in the morning on a street in Yerushalayim, where I came home and I said to my parents and my wife, guess who I spent an hour with at a shawarma stand in some loch in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Alex Schindler. So it really is something special to have an opportunity to sit and call you Alex and to dialogue with you. And so again, with your permission, you are a leader in so many ways, and I experienced something that I want to share with all of you here. In 1977, and I believe in Beshert, certain things happen in certain ways. Alex Schindler was the chairman, president of the Conference of Major American Jewish Organizations. And in 1977, the citizenry of Israel decided that its prime minister would be Menachem Begin. And for most of American Jewry, that election landed like a bomb. It was a shock. Who was Menachem Begin? Most people didn't know, couldn't pronounce his name, and the few that knew him only because 30 years the opposition party, which was in the ruling circles, described him as a terrorist, irgunist, etc. It was a critical moment in the relationships of our two communities. And we were fortunate. It was Beshert that Alex Schindler stood at the helm of American Jewry, especially in its relationship with Israel. And those who knew Alex Schindler knew where he was politically. He wore it proudly. Certainly was not on the side of Cherut or later Likud. And within 10 days, this Alex changed the community in the United States to have respect, appreciation, not only for the democracy that Israel is, but for the man and the person who was elected and who had that responsibility, Menachem Begin. And within 2 weeks, the community embraced with respect, even if it wasn't total support and agreement. And to the schus of Menachem Begin, Prime Minister of Israel, who probably more than most appreciated Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, gave a lot of state dinners. There was only one state dinner that he gave to an individual that was not a head of state, not a prime minister, or not a president. And I was privileged to be at that state dinner. Menachem Begin tendered the only state dinner in honor and in tribute of an individual for his leadership of the Jewish people, and that was Alex Schindler.
Well, it's very nice of you. Thank you. You're welcome. He turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful friend. We were an odd couple ideologically. We had our battles, but he was a giant of our generation. He really was, but that he was still with us.
This is really an example of where we could genuinely go on for a very long time. Actually, maybe we will in the back together. Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope to see you next week.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.